Hello, good evening, everyone. I'm Miguel Marquez. I'm the city manager here in Pasadena, and welcome to Shaping PWP's Energy Future, how safe, reliable, and affordable power services are provided to you. I just wanted to kick this off by welcoming you to this meeting, for thanking you for taking time out of your evening to talk to us about your ideas and your input on where we're moving forward as a community with respect to power and Pasadena's energy future. You know, one of the things that makes this city so special, I think, is how full service we are. You know, there's lots of cities just in LA County. There's 88 cities. Only about half of them are what they call full service cities, meaning they do their own police, fire, everything that we do, libraries. But on top of that, we have, our own special departments that not everybody has, including housing, which is one of the reasons we do well in that area. Public health. We're one of only 3 cities in all of California to have public health. And then we're one of relatively few cities to have our own utility, our own water and power. And that's so important. You know, having our own utility gives us local control, helps us implement local priorities. Frankly, it's helped us have one of the highest reliability measures of any utility, with fewer outages. And when there is an outage, our response time to get us back online is among the best. So, all of these things are things that we rely on Pasadena. We rely on with Pasadena Water and Power to really enhance the quality of life here for all of us who live here. So later, you're going to hear from PWP staff about where our power comes from, how it gets to you, our clean energy transition, and everything we've been doing, the success we've had so far in trying to transform from being more reliant on carbon-based fuels to being more reliant on green energy. We made tremendous strides, and you'll hear all about that. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about the support and the opportunities that are available to you as Pasadena Water and Power customers to help with your own energy needs and going green and doing other things. So this is just one part of the ongoing conversation about our public power system. And we're really excited to have you join. And with that, let me turn it over to probably Jen. But thanks and welcome.
Great. Thank you, City Manager Marquez. Really appreciate you being here tonight. I'm going to turn it over to our Pasadena Assistant City Manager, who's also serving as PWP's Interim Director, Mr. David Reyes.
Thank you, Jen, and thank you to Miguel for those words. I first wanted to start on behalf of the entire PWP family, our condolences to all of those that have experienced any loss or suffering during the recent Eaton Canyon fire. And we know that there's a lot to be done in all areas, and some of that will actually affect some of what we're talking about tonight with respect to sustainability and future energy plans. PWP is comprised of about 430 employees. We have water delivery, we have power delivery, and we also source electricity and power, and we source water. And we do that, as Mr. Marquez stated, better than most. We strive to provide reliable service for both electricity and water. Tonight we are focusing on electricity. We're one of the highest rated utilities. We are public, not for profit, which means that any revenues that are brought in, we put back into to our system through investments in our infrastructure. And as we think about the transformation that Mr. Marquez talked about, we want to hear from the community. The City Council has set strong policy goals to reach carbon-free energy, to have carbon-free energy sources and both import and what we produce by 2030, and we're making great strides, which you'll hear much about this evening. But this is also about 101, Power 101. We need to make sure that we hear from all of our constituents, all of our ratepayers. We want to continue to be leaders, not only in reliability, but also in affordability. You'll hear that we are among the very most affordable when it comes to residential electricity in and around the region. That's Los Angeles, that's Los Angeles County, that's Burbank, Glendale. And we're very proud of that, to provide that level of reliability with affordable prices. And so I think with that, we're going to get into a lot of details tonight. So I wanted to just provide that introduction, welcome everyone, and thank everyone for joining, and thank all of the PWP staff that's worked so hard through this last year and this evening to put this on. So I'd like to turn it back over to Jen Guest-Mayo, and let's get this started. Thank you very much, Jen.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Reyes. And yes, as both Miguel and David stated earlier, my name is Jennifer Guest-Mayo. I oversee the External Affairs Division here at Pasadena Water and Power, also referred to as PWP. And I want to thank all of you for joining us here at tonight's virtual community meeting. A little bit of housekeeping. I want to mention that this meeting is being recorded, and we will post the presentation recording and the presentation slides on our website, pwpweb.com, in the coming days. And this evening, we'll hear all about Pasadena's energy, and that includes our mission, our history, and our vision, where our power comes from, and the path to 100% clean energy. And once we source that energy, how we deliver it to you. We'll look at our energy rates, where the money goes, as well as give you a heads up about our current cost of service study. And lastly, we'll provide an overview of our customer programs and financial incentives, including energy efficiency, rooftop solar, and income qualified assistance. That's a lot of ground to cover, I know. So we've also set aside time for 3 question and answer sessions throughout the presentation. The first 2 will only be about 5 minutes, but the third will be a longer session at the very end of the presentation. So next slide. So next, we'd like to get a sense who is in this virtual room. So we've got a quick poll for everyone, and we'll give everyone a few moments to note their answers. And there it is. We'll give a few moments there. All right. I don't know if it's showing on my end what those results are. So I'm just going to close it. Hopefully that showed on your end. It didn't really show on my end, but well, maybe we'll come back to that and let you know. Oh, there it is. See, I jumped the gun. So we've got a primary audience of residential attendees, commercial, a little bit of both, and some who may just be interested in the topic. And of course, everyone is welcome here tonight. So thank you for that. So next slide, please. So tonight's presenters, you've already heard from our interim general manager, Mr. David Reyes, and me as well. I'll be talking a little further in this presentation. Next, you'll hear from Ms. Kelly Nguyen, who is assistant general manager of our power supply division, on to Lynn Chamowitz, our assistant general manager of finance and administration, and then Kimberly Hune, our principal electrical engineer from Power Delivery. So here's our mission and vision. And in general, being committed to Pasadena's quality of life and providing safe, affordable, reliable energy and water at competitive rates, and doing it all at superior customer service. These are all guiding principles that are at the core of what we do today and what we plan for in the future. Next slide, please. So here's a snapshot of just our community-owned system. I did mention that we're in business for more than a century. We've got about 67,000 electric accounts, and we set a record for our peak demand last September at 331 megawatts of peak demand. Next slide, please. And here's a snapshot of our history. So I did mention that we've been in service, and we were established in 1906. And during that time, our electric utility has grown alongside the Pasadena community, expanding and modernizing infrastructure to meet the evolving needs of residents and businesses. What began as a small local operation to power streetlights has developed decade after decade into a utility committed to its mission and vision, which we just mentioned in the previous slide. So through continual innovation and investment in our system and community, that ties directly to tonight's events and the discussions we're about to have. Next slide, please. Great. So at this point, I'm going to turn over the presentation to AGM Kelly Nguyen to talk about our clean energy future and our power resources. Kelly, the floor is yours.
All right. Well, thank you, Jen. Really appreciate it. Good evening, everyone. My name is Kelly Wynn. As Jen said, I'm the Assistant General Manager of Power Supply here at Pasadena Water and Power. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with all of you tonight and share some of our latest actions and priorities to our clean energy transition. Next slide. So let's start with, where does our power come from? Pasadena strives for a balanced and sustainable mix of power supply sources, one that ensures service reliability and competitive rates for our customers. PWP's power supply mix comes from a variety of sources, such as conventional resources like natural gas and nuclear, as well as from renewable energy resources such as solar, wind, geothermal, landfill gas, and soon the addition of battery energy storage systems, including the first local battery energy storage project here at Glenarm Power Plant. PWP has made a commitment to remove carbon resources from its energy resource portfolio. And during the last few years, PWP has made extensive efforts to secure replacement carbon-free energy, including the following additions: 35 megawatts of two different geothermal resources, 20 megawatts of wind, 105 megawatts of solar with 55 megawatts of battery storage, 25 megawatts of local battery storage, and plus an additional 50 megawatts of solar. So PWP has been hard at work to expand its portfolio of renewable and carbon-free resources to replace the traditional conventional energy resource contract. So next slide. So to ensure this forward-thinking approach and develop strategies to expand carbon-free resources, the Power Supply Division has been very busy over the last few years working on many important initiatives and projects, with one being the cornerstone of our electric utility, the Integrated Resource Plan, or the IRP. So the IRP is Pasadena's long-range plan for providing reliable and environmentally responsible electricity at competitive rates, and is updated every 5 years to consider the latest laws, regulations, market conditions, and community preferences. It is a comprehensive technical analysis that helps inform decisions about Pasadena's energy future. So on December 11, 2023, the Pasadena Council unanimously approved our 2023 IRP that incorporates City Council's goal to source 100% of Pasadena's electricity from carbon-free sources by the end of 2030, while optimizing for affordability, rate equity, stability, and reliability. So next slide. So to ensure PWP is aligned and advances the adopted policy goal of Resolution 9977, the City Council requested that we develop an optimized strategic plan, or OSP, utilizing a consultant with green energy expertise and transition to carbon-free. So the OSP is a roadmap that lays out the key steps and future decision points that will best position PWP to achieve the goal to source all electricity from carbon-free sources by the end of 2030, while maintaining reliability and limiting cost impacts to customers. So PWP contracted with Energy and Environmental Economics, Inc., or E3, a recognized leader in clean energy policy implementation and ambitious decarbonization goals. E3 has been working with PWP, the Municipal Services Committee, the Environmental Advisory Commission, local residents and businesses representing a cross-section of Pasadena community through the Technical Advisory Panel to progress through a variety of assessments and studies. The needs of stakeholders and the community is instrumental to assist PWP in the OSP development and process. So a key theme in the development of the OSP is extensive outreach, coordination, collaboration between PWP, stakeholder groups, and the community. So in the next month or so, PWP and E3 will be hosting the second community meeting to update the broader Pasadena communities on the development of the OSP, which will allow you to provide valuable input to aspects of the OSP development process. So we encourage each of you to attend. Next slide. As part of the approval, the City Council requested that PWP develop a dashboard to track progress toward meeting the carbon-free goals. So this evening, I am pleased to introduce the Clean Energy Tracker, which we believe includes good, relevant metrics to help us track and communicate our progress. The tracker depicts key targets and milestones, including compliance with state's clean energy goal of 100% renewable and zero carbon by 2045, which we are looking to meet by 2030, 15 years ahead, tracking our progress toward achieving the 100% carbon-free by end of 2030 goal, great comparison to our neighboring utilities, documenting the increasing community adoption of distributed energy resources such as solar and batteries, and zero emission vehicles, and the impact of PWP energy efficiency and public outreach efforts. So our goal is to update the tracker approximately every 3 months or whenever new information becomes available. So please visit the Clean Energy Tracker at this site, and thank you very much for your time.
Great. Thank you very much, Kelly. So now we're going to move to the first of 3 Q&A sessions. Now this one will be fairly quick. It's only going to be about 5 minutes. And the second one will be about 5 minutes, and we'll have a longer one at the end. So for those who would like to ask a question, you can submit it in writing in the Q&A section, or you can simply raise your hand and we'll unmute you and you can ask your question. So for that, I'm going to set my timer for 5 minutes, and we'll open the floor. Does anyone have a question? Am I seeing any raised hands? There's one in the chat. Okay, so we have a question for the group that says, what can PWP do to make rooftop solar easier? Well, I know I can jump in a little bit on that. Oh, David, I see you're turning your camera on, so I'll go ahead.
I was going to start. There's a couple of aspects of rooftop solar. One is the regulatory framework that exists today that sort of mandates how much solar you can put, and then and the other part is the permitting and the process, right? So we know that whether you're a property owner on the residential side or the commercial side, you have to make the investment. You have to take out a loan in many cases or finance it and work with contractors to get that done. Now, the city is not currently involved in that work, that sort of first leg of the work where you might select a contractor and a plan and solar panels that you would like to install. But we are involved in the permitting process. And over the course of the last 6 months, PWP has been working very closely with building and safety and our risk management section. And I'm happy to report that we've made great strides on the permitting process. One of the things that we've immediately looked to remove as a barrier, and that sort of made things a little bit more challenging, is just the insurance requirements. So we've eliminated any insurance requirements unless your proposed solar system is greater than 15 kV. And we're looking to change that and reduce that even more, where it would just be a self-attestation. So we should have more information on that in the coming weeks. That may sound like something small, but in the course of the permitting and processing, what we've found working with homeowners and contractors is that actually has been kind of a thorn in the side. It's added time, and time is money. And so we look to expedite the process on the permitting side. I think the other thing that we're looking at doing, and we recognize, and we've touched on it a little bit, is that as we think about the transition, we know how important batteries are. We have a lot of sun in California, and at times, like middle of the day, there's a lot of solar available for the most part throughout the year. Obviously, there are cloudy days and days when there's no sun, but for the most part, that's not really the time that we, as a grid system, that's not when we need the electricity. And so having batteries and making batteries more available through a more incentive-based process is something that we continue to look at. We're looking at it both through the OSP that Kelly talked about, as well as with MSC. And we continue to explore ways how we might be able to do that better. And actually, this evening is one of the first where we're actually going to be asking you, if you have some thoughts about how to make it easier. We'd love to hear from you, because we are right now in the process of of beginning to really think about what we can do differently as a utility in terms of increasing the amount of solar. We have about 3,500 customers, roughly, that have solar systems today. And we'd really like to see that at least doubled in the next couple of years. And if we can help incentivize that in some way, we have some ideas that we're working through with our legal team, with the MSC on. And then again, we'd love to hear from the public if there are additional ways that you think, whether you want to say them now, you want to send us an email. We'd love to hear from you. This is not the end of the conversation this evening, but we do know that typically cost and processing time are great impediments. And if we can figure out how to address some of those issues, we can really help to get our customers to get on board. Many of our residential customers we've heard from want to have solar. So it's not a lack of want, but it's making sure that there is equity in the process and allowing everyone to equally participate in the benefits of solar, because they're not just green, there's also a financial incentive. If any other staff wanted to add anything else.
Great. Well, we've got time for one more question before we jump back into the presentation. And I see someone's asked to put the energy tracker in the chat. It's not letting me type, but I'll tell you that's pwpweb.com/clean energy tracker. And we'll have again at the end of the presentation as well. And we will post these slides. So the question we have next is, does Pasadena have community choice aggregation?
I'm actually going to let Kelly Wen answer that question, and I want those. I'm not sure who asked that question. One of the things that we're really proud of in Pasadena is our customer service, and as Kelly is going to explain, at least in part, some of the benefits that we have as a publicly owned utility as opposed to a community choice aggregator is our great customer service and reliability, as opposed to just being a pass-through. But let Kelly jump into that a little bit more detail.
Oh, I think Jen wanted to answer that one. Go ahead, Jen.
On the community choice aggregation?
Oh, I thought that's what I read on the chat.
Oh, on that. Well, I mean, I'm happy to join in. I think we all have the same answer.
Let me just be very direct. So we don't. As a publicly owned utility, we do provide electricity directly to our ratepayers. Those of you that are not familiar with community choice aggregators, essentially, they are neither exactly the investor-owned utilities because they're not producing electricity, and they're not the publicly owned utilities that are not for profit. They are for profit, but they typically seek to act as a third party to get electricity from an energy producing entity and then pass that on to ratepayers. And what we've experienced throughout California, at least in our experience, is that there is sometimes a lack of reliability there, and there's very little recourse because the residents don't have anyone that's actually producing the power that they can talk to. They just have a third party. So there's a reliability aspect that we think that we are do much better at as a publicly owned utility. And then there's the aspect of the customer service. When you call, and I'm sure that we're going to hear many folks that have called and maybe not had the best experience, but we receive thousands of calls every month. And for the most part, when you call, we pick up. And we do our very best to address any situation as timely as we can, including working with people who fail or who are not able to make timely payments. We don't like to turn electricity off. We are, again, these are our residents. They are the backbone of our society. And so we look to work with them, whether it's through payment plans or other means. And that's just one example of customer service that you get with a publicly owned utility that you do not with a community choice aggregator in general. And again, if anybody else wanted to add anything additionally, but we do not have the CCA format in Pasadena. We are a producer.
Okay, thank you for that, David. So we're going to get back to our slides, and then we'll, for folks that have any lingering questions, we'll be sure to get back to you on the next Q&A session. So I'm going to turn it back to our next presenter. Here we go. Thank you, which is Ms. Kimberly Nguyen.
All right, so in this section, we're going to go over a little bit about how energy gets delivered to your home or business. So next slide. All right, so this is a little snapshot of the PWP electric grid. So we have transmission lines connecting into our TMG receiving station, as you can see over there on the right side of the screen. And then at the opposite end of that, you have Glenarm Power Plant and then the battery storage system that Kelly was mentioning earlier. And then between those two ends, we have a grid of some sub-transmission lines, substations, and distribution lines, which will ultimately feed into distribution transformers, whether they're overhead on power poles or underground in vaults, and those will feed the individual buildings. Next slide. So diving a little deeper on the last part of that, so here's a closer look at a power pole and a transformer. So power travels through the high voltage wires at the very top of the pole, and then it'll go into a fused cutout, which acts like a circuit breaker to protect the system. Although sometimes that fuse is internal to the transformer, so you may not always see it. And then the power goes through the transformer, which is that big trash can looking thing in the middle of the screen. And it transforms the voltage from a high level distribution voltage to a usable level for your house. Then it'll go into the secondary wires coming out of the bottom, and then into the meter panel, which will measure how much electricity is being used. Next slide. So our job is to make sure that power gets delivered safely and reliably. So you can see on the left-hand side of the slide our 5-year capital expenditure outlooks. So the gray bars on top are the capital costs on our power supply side, which includes projects such as improvements at the power plant and our new energy storage systems coming in. And then the blue bars underneath that are for the part of the electric grid that's out there on the streets. So the poles, the vaults, the manholes, the substations. And then some of the key contributors to those costs are replacing aging infrastructure and undergrounding wires to improve the reliability and safety of the system, and then also modernizing and hardening the grid to accommodate new load growth and technologies such as EV charging and solar. So those are big numbers, but ultimately it pays off because recently PWP was awarded the Diamond designation from the APPA, which is the American Public Power Association, for our reliability, which is only given to the top 5% of public power utilities in the country. Next. So speaking of EVs, so PWP is encouraging the shift from regular gas power vehicles to electric vehicles, especially since transportation is the largest industry for the contribution of GHG emissions. And so to do this, we've been investing in installing hundreds of publicly accessible EV chargers throughout the city, most notably at sites like you can see here, Robinson Park, Victory Park, Marengo, Arroyo Plaza. We also have Shoppers Lane and many others. We also have lots of level 2 chargers in pretty much all the city-owned garages in Old Town. Next. All right. And lastly, one of our big areas of investment is our smart meter project that's currently in progress. So it's also called AMI, which stands for Advanced Metering Infrastructure. And so the benefits of this are twofold. So on the one hand, customers will be able to more easily access their energy usage data. But then also it helps utilities by helping us respond to outages more quickly, because now we'll be able to pinpoint exactly where they are when they happen, reducing the duration of outages and improving the overall reliability of the system. All right, and that's all I have.
Great. Thank you, Kimberly. So now we're going to move into that second Q&A session, and I'm going to go back to some folks that maybe didn't get a chance on that first Q&A session. So Mr. Selkin, I saw that you had your hand raised. Would you like to have the opportunity to ask your question again? So feel free to raise your hand, or you can drop it in the chat, whatever works for you. Okay, great. Are you able to unmute yourself?
So first of all, thank you very much for the presentation. Thank you, Mr. Reyes, for your discussion about getting rid of the obstacle of insurance. And I think that's important to a lot of people. But the thing I wanted to ask about is demand reduction, because I remember back in the oil crisis days of the mid-70s, when there was a concerted effort to reduce energy consumption. It was quite effective. And when we're looking at prospective generation of 80 to 90 to 95% carbon-free energy, and that last few percentages are often seen as a big obstacle, I think we need to discuss how we can implement the demand reduction program either through financial incentives or other means to overcome that last few percentages of carbon-free energy.
Mr. Selkin, I feel like no matter what the topic is in the city, you seem to be an expert on it, and this is no different. We have been thinking a lot about demand reduction in a couple of different ways, but you're absolutely correct that it could be done through financial incentives. There are certainly other ways that we're looking at. One of the things that we've talked about infrastructure and reinvesting the revenue that goes into the system. One of those areas is through what we're calling our smart metering program, which will do a much better job of tracking time of use and establishing time of use rates. So we really understand when that peak demand is, and to the extent that we have different prices, we can potentially affect some of that usage. But the other one is really working and educating the public. We find that while residential buildings make up the vast majority of the properties in Pasadena, the vast majority of electricity is done through institutions or commercial users. And I think that we can do a better job, and we have identified a plan to help better educate our large users and see if there are ways, financial and or other, that we can help with some demand reduction strategies. And so that's actually part of what the OSP is going to be working on. And we'd love, again, if you have some very specific ideas, we'd love to follow up with you and hear them. We have done some research and we're aware of what other cities have done and what other programs exist. And we are looking to try to implement as many of those as are feasible. We know that demand reduction is going to be a big part moving forward of our plan, but we also know that there's just growing demand for electricity, whether it's because of electric vehicles, which is a huge component, but also we're seeing more and more data center type uses. They may not be exactly data centers, but uses that require much more electricity. Whether that's from our large institutions, Caltech, PCC, Huntington, or others, but there's also the greater demand that we're seeing in the future as we're looking to electrify buildings. Right now, we have ordinances in place for new construction of commercial. You can't use gas. They've got to be electric, and that's important. Same thing with new multifamily. If you build new multifamily in Pasadena today, it has to be electric. It can no longer be gas. And as we think about moving forward into the residential realm, I think it's really important that we think about ADUs maybe as a starting place, but where we're doing new construction is obviously easiest. And we've been thinking a lot about Hastings Ranch and what that looks like as they think about the rebuild. But I guess really to get back to your point and not to monopolize the conversation too much here, demand reduction is an important aspect moving forward. And we've got some ideas and thoughts. And if there are specifics that you have, Mr. Selkin, we'd love to hear from you and other members of the community on the topic.
Great. Thank you both on that. We've got a number of questions in the Q&A written that have been waiting very patiently. So the last one we received from the last time, it says, can someone address safety concerns, if any, with increased battery storage?
Well, I'll start. I mean, I think when I think about the Eaton fire and those of you, again, that are on the call that have experienced it in some way, and everybody in Pasadena has, one of the things that we heard, and we've heard from FEMA, we've heard from our friends in fire, that during these types of fire events, these lithium batteries become bombs. And it's really quite scary. Now, so from a safety perspective, in general, the home batteries, we don't see a lot of spontaneous combustion, if you will. That's not something that's been a major concern throughout the industry. During fires and other types of catastrophic events, it does potentially become and pose a much greater threat. And so that's something that we need to think about as we move forward. As it relates to the larger installations, the battery energy storage project that Ms. Wen talked about, that was recently approved by the hearing officer, and we're really excited about as a city. This is our first foray into battery energy electric at a larger scale, and this is maybe a smaller version of that, but this is one of the things that we've learned, sort of lessons learned. This is not the same technology that existed at the very outset of these. And we do hear about the fires in Moss Landing and down in San Diego and these other installations where fires do happen. And when they happen, it's very challenging because you just can't put water on them to put them out. These are chemical fires. And so we have probably state law has recently changed for the better and added additional safety considerations. And when the hearing officer approved the project with, I want to say, 48 conditions of approval related to fire life safety, we also adopted a mitigation and monitoring plan under the California Environmental Quality Act, which provides additional plans for security and safety. All of those will be publicly available once they are completed. They're going through, hopefully the project will pass this initial phase of approval and will collect $10 million from the state that we received a grant for. And when we start construction, it'll have to go through plan check process, at which time both building and fire will verify all of the plans for consistency with best practices and codes. So safety and fire fire safety is definitely a concern and one that we're taking very seriously, and we're really happy to move forward in I think, again, as Pasadena often does, in a trend-setting fashion.
Great. Thank you for that, David. And we're going to go on to our next question, but I do want to recognize that there's been some discussion about CCAs in the Q&A. And there was a great suggestion that said, just clarify when state mandates don't apply to Pasadena. So your suggestion is noted, and we'll take that into our next presentation. The next question we have is actually very relevant to our next topic in the presentation. It says, it was stated earlier that revenue is put back into the system. However, Measure P in November 2020 mandates that 12% of gross revenue is transferred to the city general fund. This is essentially a tax paid by ratepayers. It also affects electric rates. How will this transfer be treated in the rate study? Well, very timely question, because I'm going to turn the presentation over to our Assistant General Manager, Lynn Chamowich, to talk about rates and our cost of service study.
Great. And please, if I don't answer your question, bring it up again. But this section is to talk about a little bit of how we charge for the services that we provide and what you pay for. As we talked about, it's not just providing the power supply to you, the commodity, it's also the service and delivery of having the lights on 24/7. So with that, if you can go to the next slide, I just wanted to sort of take a step back and start to explain. Kidding. We're going to take a poll. So this will actually be helpful. The question is if you've looked at your PWP utility bill in the last 6 months. Okay. And the survey says, all right, 55% look at every bill. Well, we have a very actively engaged community here, so that is excellent. But for those of you who haven't, maybe this will give you some incentive to take a look. And for those of you that do, maybe we'll dive a little bit deeper into what all of those different components on your bill look like. So with that, now we take a step back to explain what is a what. A watt, just kidding. That was my pun. I was so proud of myself. Okay. So just to give a concept of, the usage that we measure your billing in for consumption is measured in a watt, and it's actually measured in a kilowatt, which is 1,000 watts. So if you have sort of a NutraBlend, high-powered blender, and you run it for 1 hour, that uses about 1 kilowatt. For a sort of standard EV sedan, it uses about 70 kilowatt for each full charge. And if you use about if you watch TV for about 1.5 hours a day, you'll use about 4.5 kilowatts for the whole month. So this just gives some perspective to what we're charging you for, how much your daily activities use for the future. And what you see on the right here is just what is sort of the average consumption per household for a year. So the average Californian uses about 6,500 kilowatts per year. And actually, compared to the rest of the United States is actually around 10,000 kilowatts per year. So as compared to our neighboring states, we are very efficient users of electricity to start with. And the household characteristics below are just showing sort of, what this is, the average is based off of. So it's a home with 1,500 square feet. And there's 8% of all households within California are all electric. And that's something that we expect to see change in the future. So with that, this is what you're paying for as compared to the rest of the utilities in our neighboring area. Our interim general manager spoke to that we fare very well, and our city manager as well as, we are an affordable utility. So this utility bill comparison is for 500 kilowatts per month. And this is a snapshot in time of us comparing ourselves to our neighbor. So as you can see, when we compare ourselves to Southern California Edison, we are very affordable. But even when we're comparing ourselves to other publicly owned utilities such as Glendale Water and Power, LADWP, and Burbank Water and Power, we are very competitive with what we charge for residential electric services. And to keep in mind, we're going to be talking about rate studies, but we are not alone. Some of the challenges and opportunities that we have as a publicly owned utility, our neighbors are facing as well. So this is particularly for rates as of a point in time, but there's many other utilities that have rate increases coming up. So we're just looking at a snapshot of time here, but it's every intention for us to be a competitive price for your bills far into the future. So the next slide. So this is where where the money comes from for the utility and where it goes. So the graph, the bar chart on the right is sort of taking a system average rate and what goes to what part of your services that we're providing to you. So we talked a little bit about getting the electricity to your home, and that is the costs that are captured in that grid access charge. So we are part of the California Independent System Operator, which is the grid, and there's charges associated from importing that into our service area and maintaining the grid. The second piece there in the purple is the public benefit charge. So that particular charge goes into a fund that is something that is mandated by the state, that we have that fund, and that benefits for different areas for our customer programs. And AGM Guest Mayo will talk a little bit about our programs, and some of our programs for income qualified customers come out of that program. Some energy efficiencies programs come out of that fund as well, and that is based on that charge. The other light blue charge, that little sliver, is for the excellent customer service that we provide. That covers the cost of the billing and the customer service that we provide as a utility. Then the next chunk is the distribution charge. So that is really all of the power delivery aspects of bringing utility to you. We have a system that needs reinvestment and continually looking at how we keep our system reliable, and that is that distribution charge portion of your bill. And then the sliver for the yellow is transmission charge. So that, again, is getting us to the amount that it takes to have the system for transmission all the way here. When we showed the power supply and where our energy comes from, it comes from very, very far away, some of our energy. And so it's the cost to get there. There's estimates of needing investment in our transmission of something like $7 billion of investments needed to keep up with the transmission charges. So those are huge investments that's split amongst all of our customers and everyone that's in our grid as well. And then finally, the biggest chunk is the energy charge. So that's the commodity function of the power supply and all of those costs to actually supply the electricity to your home. And then the piece on the right, and this is something that with the cost of service, we continually look to how to best balance these. So the graph on the right is the top chunk, the green chunk again, is how much purchase power we have. So that is all of the different agreements that we have with developers to bring in energy. All of the purchase power is included in that 7 cents. The light blue is for fuel and gas. We have fuel and gas needs to be purchased to run our generation units. So that is that piece of where your piece of the pie where that goes to is fuel and gas. The next big blue chunk is for operating and maintenance expenses. And that includes all of the different operating and maintenance that it takes to run the system, whether that is for power supply purposes, operations and maintenance supplies for everything that runs the utility. And then the final two pieces are really the part that make sure that we're reinvesting in ourselves on a regular basis. So the interest expense is the expense for the debt that we've issued in order to make the capital investments that we need to make. And then the depreciation and amortization is really representative of the amount of what we need to be reinvesting at a minimum back into ourselves to sort of keep ourselves whole. So as a not-for-profit publicly owned utility, every dollar gets invested back into our services. And to answer the question about the general fund transfer and the 12% of gross revenues, that is treated as a tax. If the city were to have an investor-owned utility, they would pay, sometimes it's called payment in lieu of taxes. So this is something that the voters did authorize, and that's considered an operating expense for us. It's sort of below, it's treated as an operating expense for us because if we were a for-profit utility, there would be a tax and the city would go back. The city would get that revenue from a for-profit utility. So what are some of the things that are driving the changes and how we divvy up all of the rates? So the biggest chunk of it is really aging infrastructure and changing infrastructure demand needs. We also have a lot of inflation and supply chain issues. There, you know, the lead time for a lot of the supplies that we need to make these investments take years and years, and each day that passes, sort of the prices are going up. The other things are power costs, so the supply costs of the powers is driving, and then there's also just demand shifts. And so when we talk about, you know, when power is plentiful, it costs less, and when power is less plentiful, it costs us more. So the shifting demands and when our customers are using using their energy, that drives the costs that are put into the next set of brackets or parentheses. So we have both fixed costs within the utility and we have variable costs within the utility. And when we set the rates, we divvy them up in what's the best way to recover those. So part of your rates and part of your bill is a fixed dollar amount per bill. and part of it is variable, but there is a mix, and the utility has a lot of fixed costs that regardless of the amount of consumption used, we do need to recover those costs. And ultimately that leads us to the revenue requirement, which is the money that we need to run the system. So we have the next slide there. So the process to look all of this at all of this is the energy rate study. They're the electric rate study. So this is a process that we've been working on for a while now. We've selected a consultant that has a tremendous amount of expertise and experience with California public utility rate setting. They work with a lot of our neighbors, so they were selected in 2024. And they've been working on sort of behind the scenes study and financial modeling so that when we have the public participation, we can really come out and talk to all of our customers and show them sort of the different scenarios, what the different options that we have for rate setting and what that will mean for them. But we wanted to make sure that we had a strong foundation with the study and financial modeling so that we can help people understand what this will mean for them and why we're doing all of this. I hope that we have impressed upon the group here tonight that there's a lot of reinvestment needed to keep up and to keep moving forward and staying ahead of the curve with what PWP strives to be. With that, there will be more in-depth public participation coming until we adopt the rates. We don't want the rates to be a surprise to anyone. We don't want you to look at your bill, as over half of you do, and get a surprise with what the rates are, because we do understand that every single cent counts for folks. For those who are on a fixed income, we do understand that that really makes a difference. So we don't want any of this to catch anyone off guard, and we really want to hear from them as far as what design would be the most impactful to them. And with that, we are doing it simultaneously as we're going to look at multiple different rate designs and doing that impact analysis. And then we are hoping in the fall to have some adoption and public hearings for a rate implementation that we hope to take effect January 2026. So Jen is going to talk a little bit more about the customer programs that we have, but there are things that we can do as a utility and that we are doing as a utility to make sure that our rates stay as competitive as they are going forward and with our ambitious goals. And we can do that. You know, the buckets that we have, or the funnel that we have to the left that go into all of our customer rates, include just the basics of controlling costs. Also, grant funding is another revenue source that we have that we can use to offset our customer rates. And the final one is to have debt financing. There are many people, hundreds of millions of dollars of investors have made investments in PWP through the bond sales. So that's one tool that we can use. Those are financing tools that we can use to make sure that we keep our rates competitive. The long-term financial planning and thinking about our rates is really important for us. And we can use policies to make sure that we have stable and predictable rates for our customers. We can adopt new technologies like AMI that we're doing to get the job done faster and more efficiently, as well as giving you as customers control over your usage and just timing of usage. And there's many tools that you can enhance your customer experience with new technologies, as well as us being able to do things more efficiently and effectively and using all of our resources. And the final thing that we're making sure that we do when we're thinking long-term is to proactively maintain our system to reduce the long-term costs. We want to make sure that we're not putting our future customers at a disadvantage by doing something on an emergency basis. We know that it costs more to do something on an emergency basis. So really proactively maintaining our system is a high priority for us in thinking long-term and sustainably to continue our affordable rates for our customers.
Okay, it looks like we're on to our customer programs and incentive. Lynn, thank you so much for giving us that overview. And for those on this meeting, she's absolutely right. This is sort of the starting point to talk about the rates and the cost of service study and how all of that folds into our clean energy goals and just maintaining our system. So there will be other opportunities to participate and all of the things that we're doing to work toward those clean energy goals and keep us reliable. And another part of that is how you can participate. So we have a number of customer programs and incentives, a whole suite for residential and commercial customers. They include traditional rebates to encourage customers to upgrade to energy efficient appliances and systems. These upgrades, whether a high efficiency HVAC unit or better insulation, can lead to long-term savings at a more comfortable living and working environment and there are also direct installation programs that go even further by providing no-cost energy, water saving technologies that are directly installed by PWP contractors. And this is offered to both residential and commercial customers. If you look down on the lower left, you'll see the home improvement program, which is for our residential customers. And they can get up to $4,500 in water and energy saving technologies like LED lighting, smart thermostats, low flow shower heads, AC tune-ups. The WEDIT program, we affectionately call it, is the Water and Energy Direct Installation Program. And this is designed for small and medium commercial sized customers, and they can get lighting upgrades, kitchen equipment like ice machines, dishwashers. And this is ideal even for restaurants and assisted living facilities, small churches, and a host of other small to medium sized businesses around the city. Now, we also have a number of very large commercial customers, large institutions, office buildings, universities, and hospitals and things like that. So those are very specialized projects. And for those customers with those large projects, we have customized rebates and incentive programs that we can tailor toward their sustainability projects. And on the green transportation front, we have incentives for used EVs for residents, and we also have residential and commercial incentives for electric vehicle chargers. And last year, we introduced our rebate program for electric bikes, which has been very popular. And to support customers who want to generate their own clean energy through rooftop solar, we have a financial incentive called Net Energy Metering, or NEM, which offers a significant financial incentive. And I'll speak to more of that in the following slides. And for those who may not have a suitable roof, or they may live in an apartment building that doesn't have solar just yet, or just maybe they don't have the upfront resources to pay for that, we do have a green power program. This is where customers can support renewable energy development simply by clicking a checkbox on their bill, and they pay a small premium toward that. So we try to make it as robust as far as the different options. And to David's point earlier, we know there's more than that we can do, and there is more that we want to do, which is part of why we're talking here tonight. And I want to touch on the monthly bill assistance support programs. And this is multifaceted. So if you are an income qualified customer, you can get bonus rebates on top of all of the suite of rebates I just talked about. There are monthly bill credits. There are also emergency bill credits if there's a time of real financial strain. And we have special payment plans. So this is to help our most vulnerable households maintain access to critical services like heating, cooling, and lighting. And while all of these things are paired with the various customer offerings, with energy efficiency and renewable options, customers not only receive short-term help, but also long-term tools to reduce their bills and ultimately to reduce their carbon footprint. So next slide, please. So we're talking about, all of that is how you can accelerate the carbon-free transition. We're doing what we can. I know you're doing what you can, and want to talk a little bit more about solar. We've had a couple of different conversations about it tonight, but if you're curious about solar rooftop systems, we've got nearly a little over 3,200 solar customers throughout the city, and we want this to grow. Currently, it's about a little over 32 megawatts installed, about 4 megawatts a year. Customers are starting to install battery storage, which is about 1.5 megawatts on our portfolio so far. And this is where we want to get into net energy metering. So net energy metering, or NEM, allows rooftop solar owners to earn credits on their PWP bill for any excess electricity that they produce and send back to the grid over time, and it would effectively lower their monthly utility bill. And this makes solar power not only a sustainable choice, but also a smart financial investment over time. And we've got the website there, pwpweb.com/solar. There's a solar consumer guide that's posted there. And we're trying to work with our planning department to help streamline the permitting process. We're not there. It's not as robust as we'd like it to be, but it is a resource now. And we are here to help you with that and help demystify that process. So next slide, please. So this is a summary slide. So how can you participate? There's something for everyone. And if you can install solar and storage, take advantage of that NEM financial incentive now. If panels are not ideal for your home, you can sign up for the Green Power Program. And of course, everybody can participate in various ways in our energy efficiency programs, either through traditional rebates, direct installations, and we can all work on that together as we move forward toward our clean energy solution. And it does say more program enhancements coming, and that is absolutely true. When we're talking about our cost of service study and the studies that are coming out of what AGM Nguyen was talking about in clean energy solutions, those are informing some of the things that we're looking at. And we also want to get that feedback from you all so we can put that together, because we don't want to put something together unless it's something you would find useful and something that is really fulfilling a need that is there. So I want to thank everybody for that participation. Next slide, please. So let's keep those conversations going. Again, this is a starting point to start off with PWP and Energy 101 and talking about the things that are coming. Kelly did talk about a couple of upcoming events that we're getting on the books to talk more about the optimized strategic plan. Lynn, of course, has a robust outreach plan that we're going to be doing for more conversations around the cost of service study. But here's what's on the books so far. I really want to encourage everyone on this call to attend the April 8th Municipal Services Committee. And I realize that the start time isn't on there. It starts at 4 p.m. on that Tuesday. And what you'll see, there's going to be an update for the optimized strategic plan to go over some of those details about what our options may be and how we work toward that clean energy solutions, and ultimately what council may decide as we work toward that. And then after that presentation, there's going to be an introduction to solar, and it's going to go a lot more in detail than I just did, talking about what solar is, the permitting process, and how we can get NEM involved. And if you really want to learn more about that and see if that's a suitable option for you, I encourage you to participate. And of course, we also provide water. So May is Water Awareness Month. We have a number of activities throughout the month of May, including on Wednesday, May 7th, we call it Water Town Hall. It's basically a water version of what you're looking at tonight. We did that last year with a lot of great feedback, but we also want to come back to the community and update them on progress since. And this by no means is a static list of events. If you go to pwpweb.com/events, you'll get the most updated list. But even if you don't go there, we'll be talking about it in our social media and our press releases and whatnot. And you're always welcome to reach out to us anytime. So next slide. All right. So we have arrived. Ooh, did I hear something?
Yeah, sorry, Jen. This is David.
Go right ahead,
I
please.
apologize. My camera's having challenges, and I switched to my phone, so I apologize. But just before the Q&A, and I don't know if this exactly addresses the question that was posed earlier on the general fund transfer, but all of that money goes back to the community in the form of programming under the general fund. And so I think I just wanted to make sure that was clear to everybody, that general fund transfer, it's then used to balance the budget and to provide for programs. If you think about departments like public health or housing, these are highly dependent on grants and one-time monies, and they don't have a source of revenue of their own, but they provide valuable services to the community. And without general fund dollars, they probably wouldn't exist. And so that general fund transfer that we're talking about, that 12%, it does go straight back into the community. So I don't know if, again, that exactly addresses the question that was posed, but I wanted to make sure that that was stated on the record.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that clarification. So we're going to jump back into where we left off on the Q&A. And there was a question in the chat from the earlier session that says, who was/is T.M. Goodrich? A historical question. So apparently he was the a former general manager of PWP, I believe in the 1970s, which is right around the time when the station was stood up. So the next question we have is, I believe I'm going to ping on my colleague, Mr. Jeremy Marquette, our Assistant General Manager of Customer Service and IT. So this question is, when will AMI be deployed?
Yeah, we're targeting late calendar year 2028 to be fully deployed. So that means all meters, water and electric.
Great, thank you for that. So the next question is, does the Glen Arm station produce power still? Is it via natural gas? Any plans to put solar out there? I think this might be a good one for Kelly.
Sure. Yeah, the Glen Arm power plant is definitely producing power still. We have 5 natural gas units out there that has a capacity to produce up to 200 megawatts at any given hour. But the capacity factor of those units are very low. It produces probably 3 to 5% of its capacity on an annual basis. It's truly a peaker facility or power plant, and it's really there for reliability purposes. For solar, we don't have plans to put solar there at this time. Well, like I said earlier, we are planning our first local battery storage project at the power plant site, and we are planning to put more storage projects on the site once we do the demolition of the old steam plant on the other side of the train track.
Great, thank you for that, Kelly.
Sure, thank you.
Sure. I wanted to jump back onto the audio ones. I saw Ms. Foster, if you're still on the call, I saw you had your hand raised earlier when we were doing the Q&A and we didn't get to you. So if you still have a question and would like to ask, please raise your hand and unmute yourself. I'll give you a moment to do that, if so. Okay, we'll move back on to our written questions. If that comes up again, just go ahead and raise your hand and we'll get you on the next one. So the next question that we have is about the USC Medical Building on Fair Oaks in California. The question is, do they have solar on their roof? And don't all commercial buildings need to have solar? I don't know if this is a Kimberly question or if this might be, anyone else might have some insight on that.
Well, I have the answer to the second part, whether every commercial building is required to have solar. No, every commercial building is required to comply with Title 24 of the Energy Code of the California Building Code. And there are various ways to achieve that. One would be through solar. Another way would be through a combination of, like, if you think of double pane windows and energy efficient appliances, really sort of a math calculation. But the first part of the question, I admittedly do not know. I left planning before that was fully C of O'd. And so I'm not sure if they have solar on the roof or not. It's something we could certainly find out and get back to you.
Sounds good. Thank you for that. So our next question looks like it's a finance one. Doesn't 12% or more of every dollar go to the city general fund? So that slide saying it all goes back to PWP services is incorrect? I think, David, that may have gone to your point earlier about it being reinvested in the utility. Just want to confirm that.
Yes, that 12% is, it is a part of the charter that the citizens voted on, but yes, it does go back to the Pasadena community. So in general, the rates that we set are to cover the cost of the services that we provide and the operating expenses of the utility, and the general fund transfer is considered an operating expense of the utility. And I did want to, there was many corrections of my saying kilowatt. It is measured in kilowatt hours. So thank you to everyone who made that correction for when I misspoke.
Sounds good. So our next question is, thanks for doing this. So I appreciate the thanks on that one. We're all happy to to be providing this to you tonight. The question is, any estimate on how much more we'd have to pay if major HV transmission lines into Pasadena were put underground?
I would say the barrier at this point is not the actual funding for the underground district or for the undergrounding surtax. There's a lot of other logistical and operational challenges to the undergrounding project. So that undergrounding is a goal that we have, but it's not typically constrained by the amount of money that we have. We try to sort of strategize on the timing and implementation of the undergrounding.
I think we can get back to community on, we're bringing forward the Raymond Underground project soon, and there will be a cost that we bring to council, and we can more clearly express, once we get the contract approved, more clearly express maybe by block or by 1,000 feet or something, so we get a sense of what it costs to underground. And we do know that the cost of both supplies and labor is going up, every quarter, every day, every year. And so it'll be a snapshot in time, but I think in the coming months, we'll be able to come forward to the city council for approval of that underground contract, which is going to make some great improvements in the aesthetics and reliability of electricity in that Raymond corridor. And at that time, we can have maybe a little better snapshot of the cost that it does take. And hopefully that helps.
Great, thank you. So moving on to our next question, it says on slide 25, right column, there is no cost attributable to private investment in rooftop solar. Pasadena has no cost when private property owner pays to install rooftop solar. Is that correct?
Sounds like a loaded question. No cost to the city. In terms of, I guess the question would be, is the question, actually I know what the question is, probably one that we're going to address a little more in depth on April 8th. There's a lot that goes into that question, but the city itself, right, we're not paying directly. The utility is not paying directly for the installation. We do at times pay for the transformers that are needed or other upgrades to our system. So the city does cover that cost when there's upgrades needed to the connection to our grid as a result of the solar installation. We have those numbers as well, what we pay for those on an annual basis. And I think maybe we can probably have a more thorough discussion on that net energy metering program on April 8th with the MSC and members of the community who are interested.
Yes, excellent. Yes, that meeting, the Municipal Services Committee meeting, that's available. It's held in council chambers. You can also submit questions ahead of time and comments, and you can show up and give comments during the presentation or after the presentation itself. So lots of ways to interact there, but would love to see some additional discussion on that. So back to Lynn. So we've got a question about how often will rates change?
The rates have changed, I would say, periodically. We've been going back with rate adjustments and primarily changing by amounts and percentages to sort of recalibrate. The electric rate study that's coming up will be fairly different in that there might be some structural changes or rate design changes. But there were sort of periodic tune-ups in the past. Certainly we'll give more information on those historical things when we're having the sort of rate study discussions, so I can provide more information to the community at those presentations. And the question of how often will rates change, that is going to be a really good policy question and discussion for City Council. As a result of the electric rate study, we're going to show where our revenue requirements are and how to make sure that we have a financially sustainable utility in the future. And with that, there's many different options of rate changes as far as amounts and timing and cadence that we can discuss with City Council for their ultimate decision. So I don't have a crystal ball there yet, but we could adjust rates annually if it's found to be needed annually, or do tranches maybe a little bit more evenly. But we do know that costs are increasing, and there are some pressures on our revenue requirements coming up. So that will be sort of more to come.
Great, thank you for that, Lynn. So the next question we have is, what's going on with PWP's green power program? Seems like almost no one knows about it. Will it go away as PWP's electricity becomes 100% carbon free? And I can actually take that question. And to your point, we could definitely do a better job at promoting the green power program. So I agree with your point. I agree with everything that you've said there. To the point about whether or not it would go away, I can't really speak to that. That would be something that will kind of be revealed, but I can confidently say that there will be, options for those to participate to purchase renewable energy in a form that makes sense to them. What that looks like from a policy perspective is obviously will be up to council, but that's something that we want to make sure is still on the table, and whatever form it takes will be revealed as we complete these studies and as council makes the decision that is best for the city. So the next question we have there are there currently times of the day when it's cheaper for a resident to use electricity, and might that change in the future?
Well, not currently, right? We don't have time of use rates. They're sort of set rates. Obviously, if you have solar, and that's a sort of a different story. I'll take that discussion for those 3,200 residents out of the, or 3,200 homes out of the equation here. But yes, it definitely may change in the future as we get to install the AMI, and Jeremy talked about a 3-year window. We've started that project in earnest. There's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that goes on with our software system, our billing system. We're going to need to replace all of the meters, both water and electric. And so it's a very big project, but we hope to be by, as Jeremy said, sort of end of calendar year 2028, fully implemented. And it's our sincere desire that will affect the demand response, that will likely be implementing time of use rates. But again, those are council policy discussions, but we need to be ready for this changing world. But I guess the short answer is right now, we really don't say that there's, that doesn't really exist today in terms of different rates for different time of day in a meaningful way.
Great, thank you for that. So our next question is, how often does Glenarm produce power to make money as opposed to burning gas to help when extra electricity is needed on this side of Goodrich?
Well, I'm going to let Kelly answer because she's the expert here, but we never run it just for the sole purpose of making money. That is not something that we do. But we are at times asked to run it by by CAISO, and then depending on what we run it for and how long we run it, we are able to sell that energy back to the larger market. But we don't ever run it as a city to make money.
Thank you, David. Yeah, David, you're right. So definitely we use Glenarm for our reliability compliance purposes. The ISO can dispatch it when the grid needs it. We can dispatch it when we need it locally here. So it's primarily used for reliability purposes, and like David said, we do not run Glenarm just to produce energy to sell power. So I think that answers the question.
I think so. All right. So our next question is, you said you had made progress in permitting. What's the metric and how has it been improved?
Yeah, so the metric is really one of timing, and we've been tracking because so this is ultimately an electrical permit that's issued by the planning and building, planning and community development department by the building official. So it's a building permit that gets issued. It's not our department, water and powers permit. But what we found is that the interface, we are involved in, we have to sign off on what's being submitted. And what we found is sort of a two-step, multi-pronged, not, it's sort of done in succession as opposed to at the same time. And so I have to admit that it varies depending on contractor. Some contractors have everything they need in terms of submittal requirements. Other contractors don't understand the process and it'll take longer. Other contractors, so it really does vary depending on a lot of different factors. But I guess the metrics that we've been using are we've been eliminating steps in that process and making it a little bit easier for the electronic systems to talk to each other. And that's been the metric. I think probably we won't be able to actually make meaningful measurements until we make probably 3 or 4 more changes and then have good council policy direction on which way they'd like to go in terms of increasing local solar and what programs and incentives they'd like to use for those.
Great, thank you, David. So we're going to move on to our next question that says, is there a requirement for minimum energy usage level to qualify for rooftop solar financing? If so, are there any other ways for a lower energy usage? I'm going to read that again. If so, is there any other way for a lower energy user to qualify?
City doesn't do the financing, so we wouldn't really be in a position to answer that question. I don't know if, Gordon, you have experience from, I don't know if Gordon's on, but the short answer is it's not something that we don't do the financing, and so we wouldn't be able to say whether or not the financing would make sense financially depending on how much you use. And obviously, if there's just not a lot of usage, it may not make sense financially, but that would not be a decision that the city would be involved in.
Okay, thank you for that. The next one is, isn't green power mixed with gas generated power in the green energy program? There's no separate system to deliver energy to green power customers. And for this one, I believe the green power program is really more of a like a financial, a paper transaction. So we purchase the power on your behalf, and then we add it to our green energy portfolio. So and that's probably the extent of the technical knowledge on that one. I see my colleagues.
I can help, Jen.
Yeah, go for it.
So the green power program does require PWP to procure more renewables than what we have set our goal to be. So, for example, if our renewable portfolio standard goal for the year, just for argument's sake, is say 50%, depending on how much green power program customers we have, we are required to procure 50% plus whoever's on the green power. So it does help us procure more renewables for that year. So if that makes sense. Yep.
It does. And you said it far more eloquently than I did. So thank you for that. So the next is a comment I wanted to share with the team. The comment is, appreciate all PWP is doing on clean power, renewables, and efficiency, and the hard work of y'all working out there. Thanks for your public service. So we appreciate that. And thank you for attending. Excuse me. So our next question is, how could the budgeting structure be changed to truly incentivize PV electricity, photovoltaic electricity production by residential and commercial customers?
I think we touched on that a little bit earlier. Our existing system, the net energy metering system that we have in place today, does provide some incentives where folks can sell back some of their electricity. There are many other systems that are out there in terms of council policy getting to figure out what they would like to do. Obviously, we would be making a recommendation if there were to be any changes recommended. But on April 8th, we're going to share some of what other cities are doing, what some best practices are. And this is all towards incentivizing and getting more local solar, because Kelly showed that energy tracker. That's such a great tool. And it really does show that by 2030, if we keep doing what we're doing, we're still we're still not quite there in terms of hitting that 100% goal. And so we think about that last sticky 10% or 8% or whatever that is. We know that's going to really, a dent will come from local production, whether that's solar and battery by residents, whether that's a battery by the city. We do know that there needs to be more solar. That's one area that we think that will only exist, though, if you have batteries as well. So we look forward to sharing more information in terms of best practices and what other systems and programs and incentives are out there. And then to the extent that council would like to change some of our existing practices and policies, we would obviously move that forward and work on that code change. But more to come on April 8th at the MSC meeting.
Excellent. And I'm not seeing any additional questions, hands raised or in the chat. We are right about at time. And so this concludes our Q&A. I want to remind everyone that we will be posting this presentation recording as well as the presentation slides. And this recording does include this Q&A session. I want to thank all of you for attending tonight, our speakers, our staff, and especially to you, our community, for joining us this evening in this important conversation. And this is just one part of a much larger conversation. Please follow us on social media. You can also follow us, look at us on the web, or just contact us directly. So thank you again, and we'll see you in the future.